Hey everybody, back with another video in the room. So you know I'm going to do a walkthrough lure artificial. I've been calling it mastering inshore artificial. So that's what we're doing today. And this video, I had somebody comment to me on Instagram, I think, asking me what I throw in different times of year, the different seasons, like winter, what am I throwing, summer, what am I going to throw, transition, what am I going to throw. So we're going to go over that today. The thing about saltwater fishing is redfish, a lot of times they really don't care. They're not very picky, but there are certain things you can do to improve, the quality of the fish you're catching whenever it's, wintertime or summertime or whatever, and increase the numbers of fish you're catching. And sometimes you can throw some of the stuff year round, and I do, and you can catch them on it. So with that being said, we're going to start with winter, because I feel like winter is one of those things that really it does matter what you throw. Not always, but there are certain things you can throw in the winter that really will help you catch fish. Winters, I feel like, over here, and then spring, summer, fall are all over here, with summer being a little bit different than spring and fall. But winter, I really like to fish slow. Like you always hear people say, up here in North Florida, the water does get pretty cold in the winter. It's not like South Florida where it's always pretty warm. We do get pretty cold water temperatures in the wintertime. So with that being said, I like to fish stuff on the bottom, super slow, and you got to think about what the fish are keying in on. In the wintertime here, we don't have a lot of bait fish in the bays. That's finger mullet, that's menhaden, pilchards, LYs, some people around here call them, pinfish. We don't really have a whole lot of those in the wintertime, and that's why you can throw a live shrimp here and it doesn't get picked clean off your hook in about 1 second like it does in the summertime. So what we're in the wintertime, the redfish, they're really keying in on stuff on the bottom, like shrimp, crabs, and worms, actually. The fish are like spitting up all these sandworm things in the boat when you catch them. Long, little skinny, like any worm you would bass fish with, like a little nightcrawler looking thing. They live in the bottom. Like I said, you see a lot of redfish feeding on them in the winter months. So that's why I really, in the wintertime, throw a lot of times the big TRD, which is, as y'all know, a freshwater bait. Everybody knows about the TRD in saltwater. Z-Man came out with the TRD, the finesse TRD, the short one. The Ned rig took off. Now they have the 4-inch big TRD. And sometimes I'll cut off about a ½ of this, make it like 3.5 inches. But usually you can just leave it in the 4-inch. And I put it on a Texas eye head, because what that does is, we talked about it before, it swings freely. And it's got that flat bottom on it, and it really allows you to keep good contact with the bottom. So you can work this really slow, and it's going to have a lot of action in that tail. And I really throw this whenever I know fish are in the area. I'll fish a mud flat because it'll be a little bit warmer. That dark bottom holds heat in the wintertime. I could go on and on and on about wintertime fishing, but dark bottom is really good because it's going to be hotter water for the fish to live in, and they'll be out on that flat looking for crabs and worms and little shrimp. So, and if I know there's fish in the area, sometimes I'll even dead stick this, because this thing right here is going to stay on the bottom. Your lure, your plastic here, Elastec is buoyant, so it's going to sit up off the bottom like this, and it's really going to give it a really good action in the water, even without moving it. If there's any current or turbulence at all in the water, it's going to swing around, that tail is going to swing around, and if you just give it a little bit of action, you're going to get, a lot of action out of the bait. Especially a darker color like this really works well. Doesn't really matter too much on the color. I like throwing dark colors, brown, really dark brown, greens with a little flake in it in the wintertime, and that's a really good color. As well as anything that's like a shrimp. This is the Easy Shrimps and the Golden Flake with a weedless eye head. This is the 1/4 ounce head, because like I said, I like to make good contact with the bottom. I probably won't throw this quite as much as I will something like this in the wintertime, any sort of stick bait. We kind of got on this little stick bait thing in the wintertime by throwing a jerk shad and just really keeping it on the bottom, which has got that same kind of silhouette to it, that 5-inch skinny kind of look to it. And then, found out about the big TRD, and it's a really good bait for fishing in the wintertime. So the Easy Shrimps is a pretty good bait. Shrimp bait's good. Like I said, you don't have a lot of bait fish in the bait, so a shrimp is going to work out pretty well. Or what I like to throw, especially if the fish are being really picky, and this is really a great bait for all year round. I could kind of lump this into the year-round category. But like I said, in the wintertime, the fish are really focusing on crabs and stuff. But this is the TRD Cross. Came out of ICAST last year. And what that is, there it goes. is a little tiny TRD bait, and it looks like a crawfish. This is Finesse Bullets jig head. Now this is a light hook, so you don't want to have your drag locked down. You know, you need your drag in your favor, so you're not going to open this hook out. It's strong enough. I've caught redfish on them, caught big redfish on them, but you cannot have your drag locked down if they try and run, because you're going to straighten that little hook out. But it's a really good bait, and what it does is, you know, it kind of has that same thing. This is going to make good contact with the bottom. You know, these little arms and everything are going to kick up very well, or kick up and make a lot of action. And the thing is, you would think, well, how are you going to throw this little tiny bait? I mean, this thing is really small. You'd be shocked how well this thing casts and the water you can cover with that thing. So I would say, for me, the go-to in the wintertime would probably be the big TRD. This is a dark color with a Texas eye head, working it slow on the bottom, hopping it, kind of imitating those worms. And then something like this little TRD crawls if I'm having trouble getting bit, or if, you know, they're being really picky. Also, and I'm going to go ahead and throw this in here, I'm going to mention this in every single season. This is a copper colored spoon, gold or copper. This is a 1/4 ounce flats intruder spoon. You can just about catch any redfish in America on one of these any time of year. There's a lot of people that hate on the spoon. I can't tell you how many guide trips I've ran where they get in the boat, we pull it to a flat, and everybody's throwing a spoon. And they're like, why? I fish all the time. Why are we throwing a spoon? I don't ever catch anything on a spoon. And then we just kick their face in on a spoon. Gold spoon, copper spoon works really well. Now, like I said, this is kind of imitating that bait fish fluttering across the grass. A lot of people say it looks like a little crab scurrying across the bottom. You know, it can. I just think you're getting a reaction bite out of them with this. Now, I would say these are opposite scenarios. This is when the fish are being picky. They're being really finicky. Super spooky fish, you need to downsize your bait and go to a really natural approach. Maybe throw some Procure on here, make it smell really good. And then whenever they're being active and feeding and you're covering water, the gold spoon, copper spoon, burning it back into the boat. I like to tell everybody, if we're fishing over grass, keep it fast enough reeling where it's above the grass, not down the grass getting hung up, and slow enough where it's not right up under the surface of the water. Just reeling it in on a steady retrieve. Sometimes you can jerk it, twitch it, do whatever you want to do with it. But that is a really good all time of the year bait. It's just a 1/4 or 1/2 ounce, sometimes 1/8 ounce if they're being kind of picky, gold or copper weedless spoon. And this, I almost will always have a rod rigged up with a spoon, no matter what or where I'm fishing in the United States. A gold or copper spoon catches redfish. That is just a proven fact. Moving on to spring and fall. I'm going to put these in one because they're kind of that same transition from hot to cold or from cold to hot. Fall, there's still a lot of bait in the bays, so you can get away with something that looks like a bait fish. Spring, we're starting to have some bait fish show up, so I really like to throw like a paddle tail. Throw this in the summertime as well. This is a really good bait for any time of year, really. Same thing, even winter. You can work the slow on the bottom. Looks like a little something on the bottom. This is a Houdini color. This is a great natural all-around color. This is on the Mustad grip pin hook. Z-Man's coming out with the chin locks. I have some, but just not the right size for this. They're very similar to this. I think they're a little bit better of a hook, but it's kind of that same style to keep the Elastec on there good, because you can't use a screw lock with these. I mean, you can, but it's not worth the trouble. But this is the paddlers. I like this because you can throw this and work it really slow. It doesn't have to be worked really fast. It has a really subtle action when you're working it slow. It stays in the water column. You don't have to be reeling it fast to keep it up and off the bottom. It stays in the water column, and it's a really good bait. You can twitch it, you can reel it. It's a really good little paddle tail. It doesn't have the craziest kick, the most wide wobble, aggressive, vibrating, action with the tail. It's more of a subtle bait, but sometimes that's exactly what you need. If people go to throwing these big giant paddle tail baits and the bait's kicking around like crazy and they're wondering why they're spooking fish, it's because sometimes those fish are like, hey, you know what? I've never seen a mullet swim like that, or I've never seen a pinfish or a pilchard swim like that. Most bait fish swim kind of in a tight little pattern, little swim. I mean, they just kind of swim with a little tight wobble, and they, not a whole lot of crazy kicking. Now, sometimes when you're getting reaction bite, that's what you need. Louisiana, I like to throw a big paddle tail that puts out a lot of vibration and really gets the fish fired up and aggravated. But this is a really good bait for around here, especially because it doesn't have a crazy paddle tail on it, and it's not going to offend the fish. It's very easy on them. Again, copper spoon, winter or summer, winter, spring, fall, you know, Armageddon, anytime the copper spoon is going to catch them, or a gold spoon, doesn't matter. I know some people that swear by the copper spoon. I know some people that swear by a gold spoon. I throw whichever one's on. I have tied on. If the water's pretty clear, I might go to a gold spoon. If the water's kind of stained, get that tea color, the copper really does shine there, or a little bit dirtier water, the copper does pretty good. Same thing with the shrimp. Fish are really still keen in on the shrimp. You can throw the shrimp in the transition months, spring, fall. And I know a lot of y'all are probably going to watch this video and be like, a lot of this is unnecessary. You can throw all this anytime of year and catch them, and you're not wrong. But there are certain baits that I throw in certain times of year, and I do catch more fish on certain baits than others. Maybe you're in an area where you can throw this little StreakZ year-round and catch them, and I could probably catch fish on the wintertime with it here. But I'm trying to match as close as I can to what is in our bait system and what my fish are feeding on at the time. So summertime, I like to throw, y'all know I've talked about it before, I put all on Instagram, I put it everywhere, how much I love the 3.75 StreakZ on the Finesse Eye jig head. It looks like a little white bait. You get all these pilchards in the bay, all these little white baits that I've talked about before. We did a segment on flukes or jerk shads or whatever you want to call them, and I talked about it. But this is a really good bait for summertime fishing. And the reason I'm not going too in-depth on the shrimps and the jerk shads is because I've already done an in-depth video on both of those, so I will link that down below if y'all want to watch that and see that. But I really like to throw the StreakZ or the full-size jerk shads, whether it's the 4 or 5 inch, in the summertime. It's a really good bait whenever the fish are keyed in on bait fish. It looks like a little white bait if you're throwing this. If you're throwing the 5 inch, it looks like a little finger mullet. 4 inch, it looks like a pinfish. You know, it really can be a lot of different things, but I don't really throw it too much whenever the fish are not keyed in on bait fish and they're feeding on the bottom. That's when these guys are going to shine. That's when these guys are going to shine, when the fish are keyed in on stuff on the bottom, which is a redfish natural way to feed, is on the bottom. Their mouth is on the bottom side of their head. That's how they usually feed. But again, you can throw the gold spoon, copper spoon in the summertime, throw the paddle tail in the summertime, throw a shrimp in the summertime. They're going to eat it. This is a really good bait all the time if the fish are being really picky and you're having trouble getting them to hit it artificial. It looks like a little tiny crab whenever it's sitting off the bottom. Those little arms are just up in the air, those claws. It looks really good. I know it's supposed to be a crawfish, but redfish sees a little thing on the bottom with claws sticking up. It's usually going to eat it because they're going to think it's a ghost shrimp, or they're going to think it's a small crab. And that's another thing. Redfish really like to eat ghost shrimp, and that's kind of what that looks like on the bottom. So, I throw topwater as well, but that's usually whenever there is bait fish in the water and you know there's a lot of, you know, hot water, the fish are fired up, you're seeing the fish blow up on bait fish, you're seeing, you know, bait fish all over around the boat. Early morning when the light's low, I do like to throw a topwater. These right here just took out of the package. This is the Savage Gear Mud Minnow. This is called Dirty Silver is the color. This bait does not walk like your traditional topwaters. You can make it walk like your skitter walk or your spook, where it's just all the way back to the boat. This has a more erratic approach, and a lot of people don't like that. They like to just work their bait perfect back into the boat. But let me ask you this. If you saw a finger mullet that looks like this get blown up on by a trout or a redfish and it's sitting there on the surface, is that thing going to go perfect until it gets eaten? Yeah, you probably will get eaten, but that bait fish is probably going to kick 3 times to the right, and then once to the left, and then 2 times to the right, and then 4 times to the left, and sit there and bounce around all over, because that fish is about to die, and he knows he's a snack for a redfish. I got my hooks tangled up here, or a trout, and that's what this bait does. Now, it's not, you know, 4 times to the right and 2 times to the left, but it does have a little more of erratic, a little irregular walking action, at least from what I've seen throwing them. And I like that. I got a lot of big trout last time I threw one of these mud minnow topwaters, and a couple nice redfish on it. And I really do like throwing a topwater. I don't throw a topwater enough because tournament situation, I hate when you have a good red come from a topwater, they miss it and they don't get it. they don't come back. That's when your partner's got to follow up really quickly with a spoon or a paddle tail or something and put it right where that fish was and hope he sees it. Whenever I think that if I was throwing this spoon or this paddle tail, he probably would have ate it and I would have had the fish. But if I'm fun fishing, and sometimes you get a lot more bites on the top water. You know, sometimes you can throw plastic and you don't get bit, but you get those reaction bites from the top water. And this is the smaller thing, or smaller one. Same thing, mud minnow. This is a little white one, and this is a little bit smaller. This would be good if you're having a lot of fish miss. You're not going to get the casting distance out of this. It's a little bit lighter. You can really feel the weight difference between the two, and there's a big size difference. But if you're missing a lot of fish, if you're constantly getting blown up on, they're not get it. Downsize a little bit. They both got really strong hooks on them, so just because it's small doesn't mean it won't be able to get it. And this is a big bait. A lot of people think, oh, you know, that's a big bait. Are you sure they're going to get it? You know, you might miss a couple really small redfish, but the big upper slot reds, I've had a 28-inch redfish eat an entire 10-inch trout that my client had on the line. We got it into the boat almost. He's got a 10-inch trout on. Redfish comes up, gets the whole thing in his mouth, and runs for about 30 seconds until he pulls off. And it was about a 27, 28-inch redfish, maybe 26-inch. So I've seen redfish eat really big stuff when they're hungry, just because they have a smaller mouth than a snook or a trout. You know, they got that smaller mouth doesn't mean they're not going to eat it. They're very aggressive fish. So a 4.5-inch topwater is not going to deter them if they're feeding. And that is a really pretty color. This one just came out of the box. I definitely got to throw one of these. Like I said, a Savage Gear mud minnow, and it looks like that's just the name of the topwater. That's the mud minnow line, but it looks a lot like a finger mullet. So definitely, you know, a topwater bait in the summertime months, early fall, when there's a lot of bait in the bay. Break out a topwater. There's nothing more fun than catching one on topwater. Again, I'm going to go back into it because, like I said, this is it's a good video, but for me, I'm not the most technical fisherman. I know there's a lot of guys out there like CA and a lot of these guys that are super honed in on colors and certain bait styles and, you know, silhouettes in the water. And yeah, you know, he might catch more fish than me, but I'm going to cover more water and I'm going to make more casts, and I'm not going to have 8 million pounds of tackle on the boat. You know, I'm not hating on CA. I know him personally. He's a really good guy, and he's one of the best inshore fishermen in the world, one of the best ever. But my point is, this is kind of a hard video for me to make because I feel like red fishing, they're not really picky. You know what I mean? They're pretty hungry fish. They're opportunistic feeders. They're going to feed on just about anything, anytime. You know, in the wintertime, there may not be a bait fish in the bay for 2 miles, but you can probably throw this paddle tail out in front of a fish, and if they're hungry, they're going to eat it. But that's just kind of how I like to fish. I like to throw really erratic baits in the summertime, whether it be a topwater, whether it be a little StreakZ like this if they're keyed in on the little bait fish, a spoon, burning it back into the boat, a paddle tail. I might throw the diesel minnow in the summertime because it has a little bit more of a kick to it, and it doesn't rise up in the water as much. Now, this is just because I got this hook on here. If I put a Texas eye on here or a normal jig head, it would stay down a little bit more. But the diesel minnows doesn't ride up in the water as much, so you can throw it out there and cover water a little bit faster when the fish are fired up when the water's hot. But then, like I said, I think the time where it really does make a difference on what you're throwing is the wintertime. Throwing something like this on the bottom, big TRD, you'll catch them pretty good, especially if you're fishing on like a mud bottom flat where, you know, there's a lot of heat being held and you see a lot of bait. But guys, I hope y'all learned something on this one. Like I said, this is kind of a pretty broad subject that I tried to narrow down in a couple things. I could have gone way more in depth, could have gave you more baits, but I just kind of tried to keep it broad and kind of give you the gist of the different seasons for fishing and what I like to throw, at least here at home. Now that may change if I'm on the road, Texas, Louisiana, South Florida, wherever, you know, that will change. But this is a North Florida kind of lineup. This is what I like to throw here, at least at home, throughout the seasons. Like I said, that doesn't mean that you can't catch a redfish on a bait I said for the summertime and the wintertime, or vice versa. But just kind of let this be something to think about when you're out there fishing and you're trying to figure out what you're going to tie on and throw. Thank y'all for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe. It really means a lot to me. And be watching out for the next one. We're going to be heading to Louisiana Saturday, so I'm going to be doing a lot of fishing and, you know, putting up a lot of content from out there in Louisiana. We're going to Houma for the IFA. So y'all stay tuned for that. Thank y'all for watching, and I'll be back with another one soon. Thanks. Bye.